We just want to give a slight warning to some of our viewers in this episode because we're going to be talking about really controversial issues. In fact, we've got a member of our panel who is not only female, but is not in the kitchen, not doing ironing, and not giving birth right now. So obviously, some of the Nazi Tories will be really disgusted at us. Welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. Yes, we are back. Welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter. I produce the Lib Dem Podcast. I'm a triple-hatted councillor here in Lancashire. And joining me on our wonderful voyage through everything to do with populism, how and why the Tories are going down that road, if they are indeed going down that road, and how we fight it. How do you, as Lib Dem campaigners, going to fight an ever-growing, maybe ever more frustrated populist Tory party? And joining me on this adventure is Sam Al-Hamdani, who has dealt with kind of far-right populism in Oldham for a number of years, Sam.
Too many years, yes. Hello, everyone.
But he still looks young and pretty, so it can't have had too much effect on him. And then also is Hannah Kitchen has joined us on our panel, whose MP, the wonderful Miriam Kate Conservative, was one of those people at the Nazi conference, wasn't she, Hannah?
Yes, she was. You failed to introduce me there, John, as double-hatted councillor Hannah Kitchen.
Oh, that's right. I am very sorry. I didn't know if you wanted reminded.
I mean, I don't, but seeing as you mentioned it. And Sam, how many hats do you wear these days?
Two as well.
Two hats. Some of us don't have unitary authorities, John. So there's only so much hats we can do.
That's right. Yes, I have got as many hats as I can possibly get. Yeah. But yes, we are going to talk about this, because we've had the various Conservative conferences from the National Conservative Conference, the New Conservative Conference, and they seem to be going down a particular rabbit hole. Now, we want to know what that means for the Lib Dems. What does it mean for the Tories? What does it mean for us as campaigners? And I suppose, Sam, we'll start off with you. Do you think actually the Tories are going to go down this rabbit hole, or is it just some fringe element?
This is something that we've been discussing for the last couple of years. This isn't something that they have just kind of dabbled with in recent times. They have gone increasingly down this path, and that's happened with the leaders that they've elected, and Sunak is more, not the worst of those, but the people that he's appointed to his cabinet absolutely, totally engaged with that. The promotion of Suella Braverman, the promotion of Lee Anderson, this is a Conservative Party who has gone the whole hog on this. And I don't know, I'm not saying every Conservative is like this, but I see it in local politics as well. Like, the level of engagement with this language, this behaviour, and this attitude is absolute. And the Conservatives who I do know who aren't like that feel quite alienated by it. Like, it's I know people who are in the Conservative Party who feel it's not their party anymore because it's that party.
Yeah, I think as Sam says, they've been going this way for a while, and let's be absolutely honest. I think one of the things that kicked it off was the narrative around Brexit. Under David Cameron's Conservatives, I can't remember what the ERG is what they were calling themselves in those days. The ERG was to some extent, a right-wing faction of the Conservative Party. They've always been there, but under David Cameron and those more sort of One Nation Tories, and even before that, I think I'm not the best political historian, but I don't think that under Thatcher and Major that sort of ERG right-wing faction had any particular credibility or voice. I think previous Conservative
it goes right up to Cameron, I would say. Cameron described them as fruitcakes and loons, didn't he? When he was and
Swivel-eyed loons, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And he gambled that if he did the Brexit referendum, it would silence them forever.
Yeah, that was sort of the trade-off he made, wasn't it, in an attempt to keep them quiet. And rather predictably, some might say, it had completely the opposite effect. Things just seem to have progressively worsened since then. The sort of the old timers from that from that side have been re-energized and reinvigorated, and largely, taken over the Conservative Party, really. And I think while Sam just described Sunak as not the worst, I think it suits Sunak to wear that kind of veneer of moderacy. But I don't believe, if you're moderate, you don't make Suella Braverman Home Secretary. Absolutely not a chance. And so, combined with your sort of re-energized old school fascists, we've now got this new intake of primarily sort of 2019 winners, the above mentioned MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, Miriam Cates, being one of the sort of most high profile. I mean, I think she's high profile, but she's my MP, so she's like, I trip over her occasionally in my goings about. I'd be interested to know, to be honest, actually, if all the listeners have heard of her, if you sort of come across their consciousness, because she really is one of the most vocal proliferators of this really kind of nasty, bigoted, I mean, it's fascism, really. There's no other word for it, hidden under a sort of covering of conservative values and moderate Christian values, family values, protecting our children, which is all just a cover up for bog standard bigotry, really.
And is it the element, because one of the things that came up in that National Conservative Conference, that's why the NatCs, if anyone who doesn't realise that's what we're saying, conference came from, was actually the element of the religious right that has come in from it. And actually there's a very interesting part of it, that because I would say the religious right hasn't had much impact. We're a far more secular country than the US, and I'm not sure that kind of, babies and Bible kind of politics will really work in the UK. It'll appeal to a certain small proportion, but I suppose, Sam, that's the point. Is I kind of get the feeling the more ideological a party goes, the less likely they are to get in power. They may please a particular vocal part of their base, but they never really have it. It's never a wide base, and you'll see it when we can see it in the Labour Party. They went from Miliband to Corbyn. Again, went slightly more extreme, reduced their base, lost badly. We see the Tories, who have gone from someone who had no ideology in terms of Boris Johnson. I don't think Boris Johnson has any ideology other than let's get Boris Johnson in power. And then to go to Liz Truss, and obviously the disaster that's made. Now, do you think that, I think this is almost a Tory party that's scared of itself.
I wouldn't say, I don't think it's scared of itself. I think you've got two groups. You've got some people who genuinely believe this utter dreck nonsense.
Yeah.
And then you've got some people who their priority is just winning. And so they see these people as being something that they can use, because it kind of creates a platform, it creates antagonism. It's a real attack mechanism against the Labour Party, against liberalism, and they kind of think, oh well, they're not attacking us, and they're destroying the people that we like, so I'm going to enable them, and that, I think, is the worst thing. If you're not, and it's horrible if you're a believer in this nonsense, but if you're not a believer and you enable people to follow this, really, there's so much racism, there's hatred of women, there's hatred of minorities, there's hatred of so many people, and you're enabling that for the purposes of winning. That is such a horrible thing to do. It makes me despair of humanity that winning is important enough that you're prepared to platform this kind of thing.
Yeah, I suppose that's the argument before Hannah comes in, is the thing with, a true believer, so to speak, and we usually reference Brexit, but, there were the Brexit true believers who always wanted out of the EU, but the amount of Tories that then sold their soul to a really hardline Brexit, who are actually pro-European and realised it was a bad thing, I almost have less respect for them because they're doing it out of political convenience. Hannah?
Yeah, I think back to your point earlier about the American evangelical far right, John. I think that ideology has been infiltrating the UK for a number of years now, without people actually realizing what it is. And we I know that we're talking sort of more widely today about these far right wing influences, but where the thing, I think, like the wedge issue that has enabled this, other than Brexit has been and gone, really, hasn't it? So, like, how have they managed to perpetuate this so effectively? Why are they continuing to gain in profile? The wedge issue has become trans rights, and and it's my belief, and it's the belief of a lot of people within the trans community, that the the anti-trans movement, the transphobic movement, has long been that seed has been sown, and it has been nurtured and funded by the US Christian far right. And there's been, there's a lot of money within that organisation, and teenager coming clattering in. 1 minute, please. And I think that a lot of people have subscribed to those views, have signed up to those views, and she must not be named, J.K. Voldemort Rowling. I don't even know if she has any particular religious beliefs. I don't even know that if she knows that this ideology that she's perpetuating is that of the US Christian far right. Now, Miriam Cates does. Miriam Cates is openly an evangelical Christian, and is a member of, and has been strongly linked with, a church in Sheffield which encourages and promotes conversion therapy, and which is, explicitly and blatantly anti-LGBTQ plus. And she would never come out and say, I don't like gay people and people shouldn't be gay, and we should bring back Section 28 because we shouldn't be teaching kids about the gays. She'd never say that, but she has become a very prominent voice on the anti-trans agenda, and she has used that as a wedge into that wider conversation around, nationalist Christian values. And whenever she talks about family values and protecting children and protecting our children in schools, what she's actually saying is, we mustn't tell the kids about the gays. That's what she's saying, and that is 100% from the US Christian far right.
And you are right. They do use the trans issue as a wedge on this, but I think a one that's been used far longer, and we've seen figures out today, is about immigration. And basically, it's fear of other is what they do, and it's very simple. It's, these people are different from you. And the report today, I mean, a lot of the stuff about immigration isn't actually about immigration. It's about housing, it's about the NHS, it's about other things that the government is failing at. But it's easy to say, it's because we're too full, we're whatever. It's the small boats are overloading our public services, Sam. So they do use it. It's a way of not tackling those issues.
Yeah. And there's interestingly as well, like, if you think of the Taxpayers Alliance, so the Taxpayers Alliance is not on those issues, but the Taxpayers Alliance is not made up of taxpayers and is not an alliance. It's an independently funded organisation by billionaires from Bermuda, largely, and on in a very different way, establishing this idea of, like, frivolously spending public money on nonsense such as immigration, and it's just there's too many avenues where they've managed to establish they managed to establish an idea of this philosophy, and I read through the philosophy of the National Conservatives, and it's horrifying. I really do find it horrifying. This idea that that the nation state is supreme above all else, and it really is kind of. I mean, there's a 10-point philosophy on the National Conservatism website, and across a whole range of things, and it's specific about immigration and race, and it kind of tries to portray it in this, oh well, we're not being horrible about these things, but actually family and children is really important. The traditional family built around a lifelong bond between a man and a woman. They try and paper over these things, and then in as many avenues as possible they undermine so many great things that this country has done. I think we get to this place where, like, they have seized patriotism, and it's something we're not very good at. I would make Tim Farron an honourable exception. We're not very good at seizing patriotism, but actually this country has done amazing things, but it's done amazing liberal things, and we need to seize on that and choose that route.
I'm just going to give a quick shout out to a book I've just started listening to, an audiobook by Raffle Bear, who is the Guardian columnist, who talks about this whole idea about the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Patriotism is a celebration of something. Nationalism is a hatred of other. That is the important thing. But we've talked about these various issues, whether it's immigration, trans rights, etc. Now, obviously, the classic case, again, we want to kind of go back to is kind of Brexit. Now, I always assumed we were going to leave the European at some point, because a consensus had built up that you didn't want to talk about it. Even people that were vastly in favour of the EU and knew about its goodness, because it was fairly boring. The EU was a kind of a bland organisation that did sensible but dull things. But what happened was the more emotive argument took seed and then rooted in the consciousness, and no one challenged it. So the question to both of you, and I'll start with Hannah now, is when these issues come up, it's very easy for us to say, just some fringe loonies, don't worry about it, don't give them the oxygen of that argument. Or do you think as liberals, we have to actually say, no, you're wrong, and fight it when we hear it?
Well, yeah, absolutely, John. And I think, regular listeners to the podcast will know that I never miss an opportunity to get the knife into the Labour Party. And that's what I'm going to do right now. Because when you start saying, okay, so this stance that these Conservative MPs are taking, is this just a fringe element, or has this become more mainstream? What I would say to that is, find me one of those issues and show me where the Labour Party have come out and gone, that is absolutely disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful what these Conservative MPs are saying about this, and that's a rhetoric that we do not agree with, and Labour are not on board with that. Any listener, find me an issue that, because I know some of our listeners do get upset about our constant, having a go at the Labour Party, but this is why I am a liberal. Because I'm a social liberal, more than anything else, I'm a social liberal. I just want people to be able to live their lives, peacefully, without interference, broadly within the law, and however they please. On Brexit, what did Labour say? We wouldn't do anything different. We wouldn't reverse Brexit. Have Labour ever challenged the Conservatives over the immigration rhetoric that was around Brexit? No, they haven't. The stop the boats policy of Labour said, stopping the boats, that's an absolutely disgraceful policy, that's impinging on someone's human rights. What we want to do is actually create safe passengers for asylum seekers. No, they haven't. They've gone, yes, we would stop more boats. We would stop more boats than the Conservatives would. We just go back to Miriam Cates briefly and her open dislike of trans and LGBTQ plus people. Recently, Miriam Cates had a double-page spread in the Daily Mail where she was platformed with Labour MP Rosie Duffield on exactly the same, we're just here to protect women and girls. I treat myself to one comment per week on Miriam Cates' Facebook page because, I've got better things to do, haven't I, than slag Miriam Cates off on her own Facebook page. But when she posted this, she proudly posted about this double page spread, we're from different parties, but, we share the same values. I was like, yeah, different parties, exact same bigotry, recycled homophobia and hatred of minorities. Where else have Labour failed to slam down the Conservatives on one of their hate-filled policies? This is not a fringe element of the Conservative Party. This is what Labour and the Conservatives have decided they are fighting the next general election on. And someone within the Labour Party, I don't know who it is, I don't know if it's Keir Starmer, I don't know if it's whoever pulls Keir Starmer's strings, I don't know who it is, but someone has decided that in order to stop the red wall from turning even bluer or staying blue, in order to win back the red wall, who are largely fairly socially conservative in their nature, they have to match the Conservatives on every single bigoted stance that they come out with. And I look at some of the, we've had full council today, and there are a couple of people in our local Labour Party. They've got a couple of new younger people. There's a cabinet member who is LGBTQ plus. He's very open about that, and he's good. He's genuinely good, and I'm pretty sure they're eyeing him up as the next leader of the Labour Party. And I honestly, I don't know how he does it. I do not know how he gets up every day and campaigns for the Labour Party when they are a lot of these people, they're good on LGBT plus rights, they're good on immigration. They all privately say, Barnsley voted for Brexit, but we all thought it was a terrible idea. They are genuinely open and welcoming to the minorities within the Barnsley community. I do not know how they look in the mirror and keep on campaigning for the Labour Party when they are so disgusting at the moment. I just don't know how they do it.
But Hannah, I'm doing a little bit of devil's advocate here, because for me, I think it's political cowardice. I think you should stand up and say, actually, immigration is a great thing for our country. It enriches our country. We can't survive without it, both economically and socially. It does more good than bad. But Labour will never say that. And again, part of the reason they're so coy or disingenuous about Brexit, and the reason why they're not saying, Rachel Reeves just the other day saying about they're not going to do the single market and customs union, is they're terrified about free movement of people. Again, they're using that Tory playbook, but is that why they're more successful, Hannah? Is because from their point of view, they're being savvy. They realise that they can. The Tories might implode themselves. Why alienate that voters? As much as we might think it's cowardly.
I mean, is it savvy, or is it political cowardice and spinelessness? And the same goes for you, John, for Sam, for me, for Richard, who's not joined us today. If we were all members of the Labour Party, I think we're all pretty damn good campaigners and pretty good politicians, to be perfectly honest. If we were members of the Labour Party in the north of England, we would be cabinet members, we would be running councils, we would be MPs.
Yeah.
Because, and I always say there are a lot of MPs on both sides of the House who are MPs because they have looked at the place where they want to be an MP and they've gone, right, I need to join either the Blue Party or the Red Party. And they suck it up, they keep their mouths shut, they cross their fingers behind their back when they walk through the lobby, and vote for whatever they're told to vote for. But they just keep their heads down, and they get past the grim stuff because they want to be good MPs. And I think they exist on both sides of the House. But that's why I will never be an MP, because I'm not prepared to swallow down my principles and campaign for a party that I don't agree with. And we all have our disagreements with the Liberal Democrats, nationally on a daily basis, because we're Liberal Democrats and that's what we do. But I am proud of us for sticking to our guns on this kind of stuff and being that more socially liberal voice. Because I think it's a misplay from Labour, to be honest, because when you're out on the doorsteps and voters go to you, well, what's the difference between Labour and the Conservatives at the minute? Everything the Conservatives say, Labour just go, yeah, us too. We'd do that too. So they're not putting any clear water down, are they?
And I suppose from my point of view, I also think it's a bad tactic as well, because you'll say something like "stop the boats." One of the 5 key pledges is stop the boat. Even though we've seen today that legal migration is 25 times more than what these illegal channel crossings have happened, is that if you say, you talk about immigration or the boats issue, and you say, actually, you're going to make a thing like the NHS is really struggling because we're dealing with all these extra people that are coming into our country. That is a harder campaign to launch than actually just that you've ran the NHS into the ground, and actually it's your incompetence that's caused. Because again, 2 stories come out today. You think the immigration figures and the 40 new hospitals are being delayed, one of which is in Preston. So what are people going to care about on the door? Are they going to care about the Tory culture war about, small boats, or will they care that their hospital is being delayed and we're missing out and we won't get one for maybe 7 to 10 years? What is the bigger issue there for people when it comes down to the nuts of it? And I think it's the hospital. And I think that's what people care. But in order for that to work, it comes on to the next part of this podcast, is that we've got to fight for it. We've got to make that case. And I think that's where, you've got to be brave enough to say, there'll be a section of the population that will not vote for you, Hannah, for what you believe in. And you've got to be strong enough to say, that's fine. I realise that. I am not here to please everyone. I'm here to stand by my principles, which I think is the right thing for the country and for Barnsley.
Yeah, and I mean, that's always how I roll. And to some extent, we make it easier for ourselves in Barnsley in that, there's no target seats around here, John. There's no target seats around these parts. So we are fighting, primarily on local issues. Who can be a strong local champion. Who can stand up for your area, who can hold the Labour Council to account, and so maybe some people could call me a coward as well, because I dip out of tackling those bigger issues, but
am I wrong then? Am I wrong to say that then? And you can by all means tell me I'm wrong, in the fact that, do I think the vast majority, and it's interesting, since Brexit, immigration has gone up, but the issue has gone down in terms of preference.
All I would say is, Labour and the Tories, they're bigger than us. Let's be absolutely honest. And they're not actually that stupid. These people have alternated the running of the country between the pair of them since the start of time. So, we know that either the Labour Party or the Conservative Party will run the country after the next general election, because, neither of them will sign up to electoral reform. That's the whole of the podcast. So someone in those parties has done some polling, or has done some focus grouping, or has done something and has decided that these are the issues. Why? Kay Burley on Sky News a couple of mornings ago is asking Annalisa Dodds whether she thinks women can have penises. Why have we got journalists talking about random people's genitals on Sky News? That used to be a serious and credible news organisation. Someone somewhere in the country has decided that what really should be fringe issues, to be honest. The stuff that the next general election should be fought on, we think, should be the state of the NHS, the hospitals, the cost of living crisis, housing crisis, the stuff that you think affects people's lives on a day-to-day basis. But someone within those 2 major parties has decided that actually, no, it is going to be fought on the fringe issues of immigration, others, trans people, and genital.
So that goes back to my earlier question, is that how do Lib Dems respond to this? Do we do it by hitting back, or are we just giving oxygen to those fringe issues? So, I was actually very happy that Ed answered the LBC thing about on trans issue. That was fun. He put his flag in and said, actually, you know what? I don't give 2 hoots. I nearly swore. I don't give 2 hoots what Keir Starmer says. If Boris Johnson or the right wing, I'm going to call them the right wing blob, that will be. But whatever the keyboard warriors say, this is what I believe in. But did that give more oxygen to the issue, or will that just be a little spike in interest about it, then it'll whittle away, but we've done right by ourselves?
I think the problem, so I'll let Sam come back in a second when he's got the list of where we're up to. I think to some extent we do both. I mean, we saw at the last general election, Jo Swinson was just quizzed endlessly on her support for trans rights. And I think, yeah, absolutely, good for Ed Davey for being bold enough to set us out as different. Because when you've got the two parties fighting over who can be the most revolting on some of these issues, there is definitely a gap in the market for the Liberals to go, yeah, actually we're with the minorities on this one. But then you pivot and you go, yeah, we're with the minorities on this one. But however, what we also want to do is hold the Tories to account on the cost of living crisis, on the sewage scandal, on all the stuff that on the sleeves in the Conservative Party, on all the stuff that we are campaigning on. So I think to be fair, I think we are quite good that our major campaign platforms are not around those fringe issues. They're around other stuff, the stuff that we think matters, but we have to have a response because we know it comes up all the time in hustings and questions.
And this is a good one for Sam. Is that the Lib Dems can be proud of what we believe in, can answer the question, but must learn to also pivot the narrative onto something that we want to take the initiative on. Sam?
That's it. That's exactly. I mean, Hannah said pivot, and I wanted to jump up and celebrate. It's exactly that facility, because otherwise you are arguing on somebody else's ground. They earlier on, Hannah was saying they've decided to fight the election on this ground, and we have to be bold enough to say, well, on this ground, these are our answers. But we don't want to fight the election on the things that somebody else determines. And it's having that ability to get from being put up against that question that actually is where that we've got a really good answer on, but is not where we necessarily want to be campaigning, and to be able to take that and get to the right place. We talked before about I've had to do, I faced this on a local basis, and it was about establishing that ability to get from somebody else's argument, because I knew the attack lines were coming, and I had to create for myself. It was on a personal level. I had to learn how to get from not somebody else's argument to where I wanted to be, and it's definitely not about ignoring the question, but it's also not about answering the question on the terms that they want you to answer it on. So you have to be really direct and then change and then go, but what really makes a difference is this. You talked before about the NHS, like the whole stuff about immigration. Like I hear time and time again people going, oh, too many people, our NHS can't cope. No, the NHS can't cope. And the number of people coming in is making a minute difference to that. And actually, because of the amount of tax that immigrants pay, probably actually helping overall the NHS get through better. And certainly if you look at the number of people employed in it, the NHS is wildly dependent on immigration. But we just need to be able to jump the argument and go, look at what the NHS is suffering because of that stance on immigration, instead of just getting dragged down into where they want us to be.
Hannah?
I mean, let's be honest. The Conservatives, they're using this kind of stuff as a distraction. So that they are wanting to fight the election on these kind of issues because it is a distraction from the cost of living crisis. It's a distraction from people's energy bills. It's a distraction from NHS waiting lists. It's a distraction from all of the public money that they, spaffed up the wall during the pandemic. It's a distraction from Liz Truss. That's why they're framing the current issues in this way, to distract the electorate. Now, why the Labour Party have decided to get sucked into that, I really don't know. Yeah, it's just completely beyond me. But they have, and I think, I don't know, maybe they're trying to distract as well. Maybe they're trying to distract from, I don't know, the fact they have absolutely no policy on anything. Who knows? I don't know. But it's, that's why it's being used. It's something that, let's be honest, it doesn't really matter, but it gets people talking and it polarizes opinion. And it means that, when your slightly rubbish Conservative politician gets shoved onto the round of morning breakfast shows because Rishi Sunak didn't fancy it, they're not going to actually have to talk about the economy or people's energy prices or anything kind of serious. They just get to talk about boats and immigrants taking our jobs and, really kind of like easy populist stuff that gets people excited, but actually don't make any difference to people's lives, really.
And I'm conscious of that. So, two of our regular panelists, both Martin and Alison Down, who are now deputy leader and leaders of their respective councils, they had a really good night. And we asked this question on our WhatsApp group, and Alison said she got a lot of it actually because the Tories have no local record to go at, so they did a lot of this kind of populist nonsense, post-truth kind of things. Let's all make it about these big issues that and actually she found it, and she said to us that when she was actually knocking on doors with this, people didn't care. People cared about how their local services were doing. Now I get we do have to be clever enough to realise that a local election and a general election are going to have two different ball games, Sam. But actually, it is about, we've talked about message discipline and about, and not getting, and you just mentioned there about not getting sucked on each other, onto different, and you've just mentioned about not being sucked into the campaign they want to fight and fight the campaign we want to fight. Because actually, one thing, and me and Sam were on the Northwest Lib Dems kind of exec committee where someone was talking about having passion in your thing, and it's about actually how Lib Dems fighting it with, if they're going, negative and aggressive, then fighting it with hope and passion about a better Britain is a really strong way, and they can't beat that, Sam.
No, they can't. And it is something we are not good at, to collectively say this about all Liberal Democrats. We are collectively not good at showing that passion, showing that response. Oh, have I frozen? No, you're moving. Okay, sorry. There was technical problems before. We tend to get sort of caught up in policy, and as we've all said on this podcast 1,000 times, we have more policy than we know what to do with. What we have to do is exactly that: stay on what we want to fight this battle on, be intelligent enough to know what our strengths are, but to know how to get to what we will do brilliantly for this country, because we will. Like, there are some incredible Liberal politicians with making a difference at local level and making a difference, where we have MPs. Like, they make a massive difference for the places where they are. And if we can get into a position in government where we can make a difference, I'm not saying coalition, I'm definitely not saying coalition, but to a point where we can actually implement some policies that will make a difference to people. Like, they are going to be positive policies of hope, and we need to show people. Sadly, I will use Tim Farron, and I know he can be a divisive figure at times, but he is somebody who is really good at showing that passion, at linking what problems people have to Liberal solutions, and showing an inspirational way to do it. And I really think we've got to be better at doing that, because that is the way, that hope, that inspiration, that positivity, that a Liberal solution to this country's problems is one that will thrive, will make people's lives better.
And also, Sam, deals with one of the issues that Lib Dems do get, is when people say, what do you stand for? And in a world where people don't really know what the Tories stand for, what Labour, include the Lib Dems, kind of the only party with a kind of unique USP at the moment, I would say nationally, is probably the Greens, because of the nature of like their name and being a kind of one issue kind of party, is that if you start speaking with passion and with vigor on what your core values are and what you believe in and that hope, then actually people start, I really like that, because fundamentally, and that's how you break into those areas where people say, I don't know what you stand for, or all politicians are just the same. So I suppose, Sam and Hannah, the last thing we should talk about is how we deal with this when we're on the doors, how we deal with it within our leaflets, etc. And I remember I was canvassing in Southport. I can't remember for one of the general elections, probably 2017. And I had a woman come to the door, and she was a mad keen Tommy Robinson fan. I mean, absolutely. He was like some saint who was sent down to earth to protect the white British people from the evils of the wokery or whatever. And actually, you could very quickly get angry. You could very quickly get frustrated. But I think from the work we've done, and people should listen to our canvassing training podcast, actually, one of the worst things you can do is get angry. One of the worst things you can do is respond with anger. It's actually to try and diffuse the situation, or I don't know if we're going to call this the pivot episode, but it is about pivoting away from those divisive issues, Sam.
It really is. And one of the things I find most effective is asking people questions. Like if somebody's aggressively coming at you with issues, kind of ask them a question about an earlier step and then an earlier step. And they'll engage with that. You're listening to them. You're interested in what they're thinking about. But you get to the point where suddenly you're not arguing about this really divisive point. You've got them to a thing where they're considering what their reasons were for it. And then you can engage with them and actually have a bit of a conversation where they're not assuming that they're going to argue with you. And if you can beat that assumption, then you've made your pivot. And then you can get them on to a positive thing. I had somebody come to me about trans issues, and I did that process, and I asked them questions. And then I asked them about the local swimming baths, where they have a single changing rooms. And so they just have cubicles for each one. And she went, oh, well, that's a good way, because then there's just not a problem, is there? And I was like, yeah, exactly. There are solutions where this is just not a problem. And suddenly she was like in a totally different space, and we were not having an argument. We were just having a conversation about ways to find solutions.
Hannah.
Yeah, and I think to some extent you do just have to pick your arguments, because no one wins 100% of the vote, and there are just going to fundamentally be people that are not going to vote for us. And I remember, just popped up on my memories actually that 12 months ago I was down in Tifton and Honiton campaigning to get Richard Ford elected in the by-election. And I spoke to many Conservatives during that time. But there was one particular interaction where this sort of older lady came out of her house into the front garden, and it was just before the Jubilee, wasn't it? So there was much patriotic bunting. And she said to me, oh yes, the Liberal Democrats, yes. Yes, the thing with the Liberal Democrats is I don't agree with your policy on abortion. And I said, oh right, more of a conservative then. Well, she said, well, I do like the Liberal Democrats on many things, but yes, your views on abortion, well, that's just a red line for me. And I just went, it's a red line for me too. Thank you very much. Bye. Because I'm not standing in anyone's front garden and having an argument about, my rights to choose what I do with my body. So, for me, that was I'm just literally not going there with this conversation. She'd already made up her mind, she'd already made up her mind. I'm not going to stand there and persuade, I'm not going to stand there and try and persuade someone that people are perfectly entitled to have an abortion should they choose. And so I just chose to walk away on that one. And I think, this is something that actually, I encourage. Some of my team are quite novice canvassers, and some of them really do need to learn when to walk away. Not everyone's going to vote for you. You're not winning that argument with this person. You can try your pivot, you can try something else, you can try and find common ground, but sometimes you just have to go, not only is this person not going to vote for me, I do not actually want their vote.
And one of the things I learned quite a while ago in politics is that people don't have to agree with you on all issues to vote for you. This is the thing. So people might disagree with me on numerous things. And this one lady came up to me, and this was about stop and search powers and things like that. This is another one of these culture issues about law enforcement, lock people up longer, hang them or whatever else, which again, Labour is quite cowardly on in terms of actually talking about, rehabilitation and actually stopping offending happening in the first place is a far better way of going about it. But I had done the use of evidence-free stop and search in Lancashire, how it was disproportionately used against minorities, and I was in the paper about it. And this woman said to me, and it was a lovely conversation. I really didn't agree with you on this issue about stop and search. If they've got nothing to hide, they shouldn't worry about it. And we could have gone into a huge long argument into it, but she actually, on 99% of other issues, she agreed with me. And sometimes you don't have to beat people down on every single argument. I'm going to prove I'm right. I'm going to prove you're wrong. And so I'm going to feel better about it. When actually all you're going to do is probably turn them off, make yourself het up and miserable, and probably lose an election. So it's not the way to go, Sam.
I've said it before. There's a wonderful piece of research where they beta tested Democrat and Republican, this was in America, and they kind of put policy things in front of people, and people were more likely to vote for somebody that they disagreed with between 10 and 30% of the stuff than somebody that they agreed with on 100% of the stuff. People are more likely to vote for you if they disagree with you on some stuff. So let that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've really enjoyed this episode, actually, talking about populism, because we'll see where the Tory party goes. My gut instinct is, because I was getting quite worried, because the Lib Dems have done very well in the last few local elections, and how are we going to do when the Tory party starts to get slightly more popular, when maybe they're out of power in a few years' time? But if one thing for me, and I truly believe, is if the Tories go down this rabbit hole, if they go down this far-right rabbit hole, they'll be out of power for a very long time, because the majority of British people are not where they are. They may have certain issues that trigger them, but actually, ultimately, it's about competence, and it's about fairness, and it's about Britain getting into a better place. And that's where I think I'll leave today's episode. Now, Sam has just nipped on and off because he's got various parenting duties. So on behalf of myself, Sam, and Hannah, we hope you have a very wonderful and you're enjoying the warm weather. But if you have any questions whatsoever, by all means, fire us in on our social medias. We want to say a huge thank you to all our Patreon subscribers, to all the people that listen and comment and say really lovely things about it. I got a really lovely message from a member who had got elected a few weeks ago, just saying how wonderful the Lib Dem podcast was and how important they feel it was to give them energies, etc. So we really do appreciate it. We'll be back with loads more, and even more excitingly, the Lib Dem podcast team has virtually all booked into the same hotel for conference in autumn. It might be absolute carnage, and I'm slightly excited, slightly nervous for it as well. But have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.